Instructor Vexa's six-jointed fingers tapped the lectern, each click echoing through the domed hall like a mallet on bone. Her hide, the color of sun-bleached moss, rippled with the subtle chromatophores that betrayed irritation. Before her sat 300 cadets from 18 species, chitin-plated Griv, hulking Brachus, lithe Sulmir, and a single human. Class 5 predators, she intoned, her voice flattened by the translator implant, are the universe's ultimate hunters. Instinctual, territorial, cognitively resistant to subjugation. Their aggression cannot be trained out. Their loyalty cannot be earned. Any attempt at domestication ends in dismemberment. This is biological law. A hologram bloomed above her, rotating a nightmare rendered in sinew and serrated bone. 6 legs, each tipped with claws that could shear tank armor. A jaw that unhinged sideways, revealing 3 rows of serrated dentition. The Vulkar. An alpha female, the data tag indicated, captured at the cost of 19 lives. This specimen, designated Nightmare, exemplifies the law. She killed 2 handlers before sedation. She cannot be tamed. She cannot be broken. She remains what evolution sculpted, a perfect killing organism. A ripple of assent moved through the Griv cadets. The Brachus grunted in ancestral fear. Instructor Vexa swept her pupilless eyes across the assembly, daring contradiction. Then a hand went up. 5 fingers. Blunt nails. Pale skin. Cadet Kalen Sorensen. You have a question, Vexa said. The human stood. He was not large, dwarfed by the Brachus, delicate beside the Sulmir. Yet the motion pulled every gaze. His face held no arrogance, only the quiet gravity of a man who had already measured the cost of what he was about to do. Not a question, instructor. His voice carried a low, graveled cadence. You said no species has ever tamed a Class 5 predator. You said it's biological law. I did. Kalen glanced at the hologram, at the frozen image of Nightmare mid-roar. Something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or an old grief. Want me to show you? The silence that followed was absolute. Not a claw clicked. Not a wing folded. Vexa's chromatophores spasmed into spirals of white shock. You are offering to enter the enclosure, she said slowly. An attempt to tame an untamed Vulkar. Yes. You understand the consequences of failure are not merely academic. She will kill you. I understand. A Sulmir cadet let out a hissing laugh. The primate has a death wish. Others joined, but Kalen remained still, eyes on Vexa. She should have refused. Every regulation demanded she refuse. But the human certainty was a splinter in her mind. And the scientist in her wanted to see it extracted, or proven. If you fail, she said, you will be expelled from the academy, provided there is enough of you left to expel. If you die, your blood is on your own arrogance. Kalen nodded once. When do we begin? Now. Vexa deactivated the hologram with a slash of her hand. The dome is ready. I hope your species mythology of taming beasts holds true, Cadet Sorensen. I truly do. As the class rose in a cacophony of murmurs and clicking limbs, Kalen walked toward the exit, his stride easy, unhurried. No one saw him press his palm briefly against his chest, over the scar that ran from collarbone to sternum. A scar left by a creature from Earth's deep woods, when he was 14 years old, and learned the first hard lesson of the bond between predator and boy. Behind him, Instructor Vexa's translator caught her final whisper, meant for no one. What are humans, that they do not fear what should be feared? No one answered. But the question hung in the air like smoke before a fire. The containment dome was a hemisphere of reinforced polyceramic, half a kilometer across. Its interior was sculpted with rock formations, a stagnant water pool, and a den carved from synthetic stone. Observation galleries ringed the upper curve, packed with cadets, instructors, and a medical team on standby. Draven, a Threx cadet with scales the color of dried blood, leaned against the rail and bared his needle teeth. Let's see the mammal get shredded, he chittered to his cohort. Kalen Sorensen stood at the blast door, stripped of his armored tunic, wearing only a gray undershirt and fatigue trousers. He held a standard ration pack in one hand. The security officer, a Brachus with 4 arms, hesitated. I am required to ask, Do you wish to withdraw?
No.
The door unsealed with a pneumatic hiss. Kalen stepped through into 40-degree heat and the musk of carnivore. Nightmare was already watching. She emerged from the shadow of a basalt spire, her 6 legs moving in fluid synchronicity, each paw landing without sound. She was larger than the hologram had suggested, 2 meters at the shoulder, 4 meters from snout to hindquarters, with a tail like a whip of braided steel. The 3 rows of teeth remained hidden behind closed jaws, but her eyes, amber with slit pupils, locked onto Kalen with the weight of an avalanche waiting to fall. The gallery fell silent. Vexa magnified her view, recording every detail. Kalen walked forward, not toward the beast, but at an angle, presenting his side. He did not raise his hands. He began to hum. The sound was low, rhythmic, a melody that rose and fell in waves of 4 beats. A lullaby, one that grandmothers in the Carpathian foothills had crooned for centuries to soothe colicky infants and restless dogs alike. The frequency resonated in the infrasound range, felt more than heard. Nightmare's ears swiveled forward. Her nostrils flared. The ridges along her spine bristled, then smoothed. She took 1 step forward, then another, her head lowering. Kalen sat down in the dusty soil. He exposed his throat. He opened the ration pack and crumbled a bar of compressed protein between his fingers. The scent drifted, minerals, fats, a hint of sweetener. The Volker crossed the remaining distance in 3 bounds. A collective gasp tore through the gallery as her jaws unhinged, the triple rows of teeth gleaming, and halted a handspan from Kalen's face. Hot breath washed over him. A growl rumbled from her chest, a frequency that vibrated in his sternum. He did not flinch. Did not look away. His hum continued uninterrupted. "I know," he whispered, barely audible to the external mics. "You've been alone for a long time." "So have I." Nightmare's amber eyes searched his. The Predator software on Vexa's display tracked cortisol spikes, pupil dilation, heart rate. Kalen's vitals were steady. Calm. Utterly calm. The Volker's growl faded. Her jaws closed. She extended her massive head and sniffed the length of his arm, pausing at his open palm with the crumbled ration. Her tongue, rough as sandstone, lapped the food delicately from his skin. The gallery erupted in disbelief. Draven's scales flushed black with rage. Vexa leaned so close to the glass her breath fogged it. Then, without warning, Nightmare's pupils contracted. Her head snapped toward the observation windows as if sensing the hostile stares. A low, protective rumble built in her throat, and she shifted her bulk sideways, placing herself between Kalen and the watching crowd. She was guarding him. Vexa's translator barely caught her own hoarse whisper. "What is this?" The Threx cadet slammed a clawed fist against the rail. "Cheating! The human has used pheromonal manipulators. This is not taming. It is biological warfare." His accusation rippled outward, gaining furious momentum. But in the enclosure, Kalen heard none of it. He slowly raised his hand and laid his palm flat on the Volker's brow. "You need a name," he said. "I'll call you Sierra." The Volker closed her eyes and pressed into his touch. The air changed. A low, insistent klaxon began to pulse, and the dome lights flickered to emergency red. A voice boomed over the address system. "Containment breach. Containment levels 4, 5, and 6 compromised. All personnel evacuate. Repeat. Volker specimens have been released." Sierra's eyes flew open. Kalen felt her muscles coil like springs. In the gallery, cadets scattered. Vexa's face drained of color as she understood what the sabotage meant. 3 other Volkers were loose, and the only path to safety was through the corridor where the first of them was already roaring. The alarm strobed the corridor in crimson pulses. Kalen rose from the dirt, one hand still resting on Sierra's shoulder. The Volker's rumble had become a deep, chest-shaking vibration, a warning aimed at something beyond the enclosure's inner door. In the gallery, Draven had vanished. Vexa was shouting into her comm, demanding status reports, but the security feeds showed chaos. Personnel fleeing. A Griv guard being dragged into a ventilation shaft. The other 3 Volkers moving in coordinated pack patterns through the research wing. "Cadet Sorensen, can you hear me?" Vexa's voice crackled through the dome speaker. "I hear you." Stay inside the enclosure. Blast doors are sealing. You'll be isolated until... No. Kalen's voice had an edge that cut through the static. If the other Volkers are loose, sealing me and Sierra makes us a target. They'll sense her and try to free her or challenge her. Either way, people die. The alternative is you walking into a corridor with 3 unbonded killing machines. Yes. He strode to the inner hatch, Sierra a silent shadow at his heel. The door sensed his approach and opened, revealing a smoke-hazed passageway strewn with overturned equipment carts. A junior medic, a Sulmir with a broken wing, huddled behind a toppled scanner. 20 meters beyond her, a male Volker, younger than Sierra, more wiry, with a fresh scar across his snout, paced with lethal intent. The medic saw Kalen and froze. The male Volker saw Kalen and charged. Sierra moved before thought became action. She launched past Kalen, colliding with the male in a tangle of claws and snapping jaws. The sound was horrific, grinding metal wrapped in thunder. Kalen ran toward the medic, grabbed her by the collar, and hauled her behind a structural pillar. "Stay down," he ordered. Then he stepped into the open. Sierra had pinned the male, her teeth clamped on his throat, scruff, not piercing, but holding. The male thrashed, snarling, until a hum cut through the din. Kalen had modulated the lullaby into something deeper, a descending scale that mimicked the subvocalization of an alpha wolf. Except no wolf existed. But the Volker didn't know that. The sound bypassed cognition and hit instinct. The male stilled. His pupils flickered. Kalen approached slowly, stripping the last ration bar from his pocket. He dropped it near the male's muzzle. "Easy," he murmured. "Not your enemy. Not hers. We're packed now." Sierra released her grip and took a step back, watching. The male sniffed the ration, then Kalen's extended hand. A long, tense moment. Then the Volker licked his palm and let out a chuffing exhale. "Good boy." Kalen scratched behind the male's ear. In the observation gallery, Vexa stared at her monitors, data streaming in real time. Kalen's dermal readings showed a surge in unique peptide secretions, compounds she had never catalogued in any sapient species. They were binding to the Volker's olfactory receptors, triggering dormant loci in the predator's genome. Genes that had been inactive for 500,000 years. "They're pack animals," she breathed. "They were always pack animals. They just forgot how." Draven's voice cut in, raw with fury. "You're all blind. He's turning them into weapons. That creature nearly killed me." The Threx cadet had reappeared on the security feed, barricaded inside a storage room 2 corridors over, his leg bleeding from a gash. The third Volker, a scarred old female, clawed at the door with rhythmic, patient strikes. Kalen heard Draven's transmission over the open channel. He looked at Sierra, then at the newly calmed male. "Can you find the other one? The old female?" The male's ears swiveled. He gave a short, sharp bark and took off down the corridor. Sierra followed, and Kalen ran after them, bare feet pounding on cold alloy. They rounded the corner to find the old female crouched at the storage room door, which was now buckling inward. Draven's terrified hissing filled the comms. Kalen didn't shout. He sent the hum rolling ahead of him like a wave, and both Sierra and the male joined him, not with the same sound, but with a low thrumming in their chests that harmonized with his rhythm. The old female paused, turned. Her milky eyes found Kalen, then the 2 younger Volkers flanking him. She did not submit. She lowered her head and whined, a sound of deep, aching loneliness that twisted something in Kalen's chest. He knelt. "I know," he said. "Come on." The old female limped forward and pressed her forehead to his. In the storage room, Draven watched through a crack in the door, his scales pale with an emotion he had no name for. Vexa recorded everything, her hands trembling. And somewhere in the orbital command station high above, a vice admiral watched the feed and began composing a priority message to the Admiralty Board. It read, "We have a new weapon." Kalen, stroking the old female's scarred muzzle, had no way of knowing that in saving lives, he had just put every Volker, and himself, in the gravest danger yet. The immediate crisis ended when a tactical response team in full exo-armor breached the research wing, expecting a slaughterhouse. Instead, they found a human sitting cross-legged on the floor with 4 Volkers lying around him like contented hounds. The lead officer, a Brachus named Grull, lowered his plasma rifle with all four hands, baffled. "Situation secure," Kalen said without looking up. "The old one needs a stem pack and antibiotics. Her leg wound is infected." Grull's helmet retracted. "You tamed them. Bonded. There's a difference." "What difference?" Kalen finally met his gaze. "You tame a tool. You bond with a partner. If you don't understand that, none of this works." The words landed with strange weight. Grull said nothing, but his posture shifted, less combat-ready, more contemplative. Medics swarmed in, sedating the three newly bonded Vulkars for transport to a secure veterinary bay. Sierra refused sedation, pressing close to Kalen until he accompanied her into the lift. Draven was extracted from the storage room, sullen and silent. The wound on his leg was superficial, but his pride had been gutted. As medics tended to him, he stared at Kalen's back with a cold, reptilian intensity that promised this was not over. Instructor Vexa met Kalen in the debriefing chamber. Her chromatophores cycled through a complex pattern, scientific excitement wrestling with deep unease. "I have analyzed the biochemical data," she said. "Your dermal microbiota produce a cocktail of short-chain fatty acids, modified oxytocin analogs, and a previously unrecorded peptide chain that triggers a dormant social bonding gene sequence in Vulkars. You didn't tame them. You woke them up. They were already pack animals. Their ancestors just forgot, because their homeworld's environment made pack behavior a liability. Solitary hunting was more efficient. The gene remained, buried under millennia of adaptive silence." She paused. "How did you know it would work?" Kalen's face tightened. He touched the scar beneath his shirt. "When I was 14, I was stalked by a mountain lion in the Carpathians. For 2 days, it hunted me. On the third night, I stopped running. I sat down and sang the lullaby my grandmother taught me. The lion lay down 10 meters away and stayed until sunrise. When the rescue team arrived, it vanished. I didn't tame it. I just let it know I wasn't a threat. And somehow, it decided I wasn't prey. That should not have been possible. Felines are solitary predators." "No. But maybe every predator remembers what it was before the universe made it cruel." He looked at her, eyes tired. "What happens now?" Before Vexa could answer, the door hissed open. Vice Admiral Thorn strode in, flanked by 2 intelligence officers. His species, the Keth, were tall, angular, and known for their strategic ruthlessness. His voice was polished chrome. "Cadet Sorensen, the Admiralty thanks you for your extraordinary demonstration. The military applications of this bonding ability are beyond valuation. Imagine pack-bonded Vulkar strike teams. Planetary assault units with organic loyalty. Living weapons that cannot be hacked or subverted." Kalen stood slowly. Sierra, resting in the corner, lifted her head. "They aren't weapons, Admiral. They're sentient beings. I bonded with them. I didn't program them. The distinction is negligible from a tactical perspective. It's everything from a moral one." Thorn's lipless mouth curved into something that wasn't a smile. "Morality is a luxury during peacetime. The Alliance faces threats that do not share your ethical framework. You will train more humans to replicate this bond. The Vulkar program will be fast-tracked. And if I refuse, then the Vulkars you've bonded with will be studied, dissected, their genome harvested for synthetic replication of the bonding mechanism. And you will be detained for endangering Alliance security." Kalen felt Sierra's growl vibrate through the floor before he heard it. He placed a hand on her neck. "Not yet. You don't understand what you're doing," he said quietly. "I understand perfectly," Thorn replied. "We are weaponizing the one thing the universe never saw coming. Humanity's impossible, irrational capacity to love what should only be feared. Consider it a compliment." The guards moved forward. Kalen let them take his arms. As they marched him out, Vexa caught his gaze and held it, her expression unreadable. That night, in the secure holding cell, Kalen sat with his back to the wall and hummed the lullaby under his breath. For levels above, in the veterinary bay, Sierra's ears lifted. Her amber eyes opened. Somewhere in her ancient brain, A gene that had slumbered since before her species learned to kill alone flared to life. And with it came a new, burning imperative. Find Pac. Protect Alpha. Her jaws closed on the sedative drip line and tore it free. The tribunal chamber was a circle of judgment. 12 species, 12 faces, 12 expressions ranging from clinical interest to thinly veiled hostility. Kalen stood at the center on a raised dais, wrists bound by maglocks, his uniform stripped of insignia. The charges glowed on the floating display: reckless endangerment, biological manipulation without authorization, and, most damning, refusal of a direct military directive. Vice Admiral Thorne presented the case with surgical precision. Cadet Sorensen's actions, while undeniably impressive, represent a fundamental threat to order. A single human, untrained and unauthorized, can override the instincts of apex predators that have defied every known form of control. What happens when other humans learn this ability? What happens when a hostile power coerces one? We must understand and weaponize this before our enemies do. Cadet Sorensen's refusal is not conscience. It is insubordination. Kalen's defense advocate, a weary-eyed Griv named Salvac, argued for leniency. Cadet Sorensen acted to save lives. The bond he formed was spontaneous, not weaponized. To punish him for refusing to turn sentient creatures into tools of war is to punish the very morality the Alliance claims to uphold. A ripple of murmurs moved through the council. Kalen remained silent, his gaze fixed on the empty chair where the Vulkar representative should have been. Vexa had been summoned as an expert witness but was conspicuously absent. Then the doors at the rear of the chamber exploded inward, not with explosives, but with six-legged, saber-fanged velocity. Sierra smashed through the reinforced alloy like it was paper, landing in the center of the circular floor with a roar that shook the seats. 3 other Vulkars streamed in behind her, the male, the old female, and a juvenile no one had realized existed until now. They formed a protective ring around Kalen. Fangs bared. Hackles raised. The council erupted. Guards raised weapons. Alarms shrieked. But Kalen's voice cut through the chaos. Hold, Sierra. Hold. The Vulkars froze. Sierra's growl subsided, though her eyes remained locked on Thorne with homicidal intent. The other 3 held their positions, trembling with restraint. Kalen looked at the council, his voice raw. You see weapons. I see a mother who broke through 4 levels of a military installation because she thought her pack was in danger. You want to dissect that? Study it. Replicate it in a lab. You can't. This isn't biochemistry anymore. It's trust. And you can't synthesize trust. Vexa chose that moment to enter through the shattered doorway, stepping calmly over debris. Her chromatophores were a steady, determined blue. The human is correct. I have completed my analysis. The bonding mechanism is not merely chemical. It requires sustained emotional reciprocity. The Vulkar must choose to accept the bond. It cannot be forced. Attempts to militarize it without consent will fail, and the backlash will be catastrophic. She projected her data onto the central display. The gene activation is a two-way process. When the human bonds, his own neurochemistry alters. Cortisol drops. Oxytocin rises. The bond changes both species. If you try to turn this into a weapon, you will break the very mechanism you seek to exploit. Thorne's angular features tightened. You are undermining Alliance security, Instructor. No. I am preserving it. Because if you push this bond into warfare, you will create a creature that has all the Vulkar's lethality and none of its loyalty. You will create the very monster you claim to fear. The council chamber fell into a deep, heavy silence. Kalen, still bound, looked at Sierra. The Vulkar stepped forward and gently closed her jaws around the maglocks on his wrists. A single, precise bite, and the restraints clattered to the floor. No one moved to stop him. The head counselor, an ancient Sulmir with feathers gone silver with age, spoke at last. This council rules the charges against Cadet Sorensen dismissed. The Vulkars are hereby recognized as proto-sentient beings under Alliance protection. The bond program will proceed under joint human-Vulkar oversight, with Cadet Sorensen as primary liaison. He fixed Thorne with a cold stare. And, Vice Admiral, your proposal for weaponization is denied. with prejudice. Thorn's jaw worked silently. Then he turned and strode from the chamber without another word. Kalen knelt and pressed his forehead to Sierra's. "Good girl," he whispered. "Good girl." In the gallery above, Draven watched through a ventilation grate, his scales now a mottled gray of deep, corrosive hatred. His hand clutched a data spike loaded with every scrap of information on the Volker bonding mechanism, including the chemical formula of the human peptides. The bond had been protected, but its secret had already been stolen. The facility on the moon of Cygni 9 had been a penal colony. Now it was home to the first Volker-human integration program, and Kalen Sorensen walked its corridors like a man who had finally found his purpose. 6 months had transformed the bleak compound. Training yards buzzed with activity, human handlers running alongside their Volker partners, practicing coordination drills, obstacle courses, and most importantly, just being together. Sierra had whelped a litter of 4. The pups, now half-grown, were inseparable from the human children of the support staff. A 6-year-old girl named Mira could often be found asleep in the whelping den, buried under a pile of fuzzy, 6-legged bodies. The image had become the program's unofficial emblem, not a weapon, but a promise. Kalen stood on a viewing platform overlooking the main yard, watching 2 new cadets, a woman from the Martian colonies and a lanky young man from the Pacific archipelago, work with their juvenile Volkers. Vexa stood beside him, her tablet displaying the latest genetic data. "The bonding gene is now dominant in all second-generation Volkers born in captivity," she said. "They're imprinting on humans within hours of birth. It's accelerating. Is that bad? It's unprecedented." She paused. "But no, I don't think it's bad. I think it's what they were always supposed to be. We're not changing them. We're restoring them." A priority alert chimed on Kalen's wrist unit. He read the message, and his face went hard. "We've got incoming. The council delegation is early, and they're bringing a visitor." The delegation arrived in a storm of ceremony. 12 council representatives, aides, security, and a figure Kalen recognized instantly. Draven. The Threx was no longer a cadet. He wore the insignia of a private military contractor. His scales were now a shimmering, iridescent black, the color of a Threx who had achieved high status through means left unspecified. "Cadet Sorensen." Draven hissed, the title dripping with mockery. "Or is it director now? I've been looking forward to seeing your little petting zoo." Kalen's response was to whistle. Sierra appeared beside him in less than 3 seconds. Her presence was a silent, overwhelming refutation of Draven's insult. "The demonstration will begin shortly," Kalen said, his voice level. "You'll see what bonded pairs can do in a simulated threat scenario. After that, you can ask your questions." The demonstration was flawless. A mock invasion by hostile drones was met by 6 human Volker teams moving with a coordination that left the council delegates speechless. The Volkers intercepted projectiles mid-flight. They flanked, herded, and neutralized without a single injury to any living target. The humans moved inside their pack, not as masters, but as nodes in a single, fluid organism. When it ended, the head counselor rose to applaud. But Draven remained seated, his smile a knife slash across his face. "Impressive," he called out. "But you're still thinking too small. You've given them toys. I've been developing the real application." He raised his hand. On his palm, a small projector displayed a chemical formula. Kalen recognized it immediately. His own dermal peptide sequence, slightly modified. "I synthesized it," Draven said. "No bond required. No trust. Just a spray, and any Volker will obey. I've already sold the patent to 17 military contractors across the Outer Rim." The courtyard went silent. Kalen felt Sierra's muscles bunch beneath his hand. "You can't spray loyalty. It doesn't work that way." "It does now." Draven stood, gesturing to the sky. "In fact, let me demonstrate." The first missile hit the outer wall before anyone could react. Explosions bloomed across the compound. Precision strikes from orbit. Draven's ships. Draven's soldiers. They descended in drop pods, armored Threx mercenaries armed with aerosolized peptide dispensers. Their target, the whelping den. Kalen was already running. "Protect the pups." All teams, defensive formation. The battle that followed was not a demonstration. It was a nightmare of smoke and blood, of human screams and Vulcar roars. Sierra moved like black lightning, tearing through mercenaries with a fury that left nothing intact. The other bonded pairs fought with desperate, heartbroken courage. But Draven's synthesized spray did something terrible. It confused the unbonded Vulcars, the wild ones Draven had captured and brought with him. They attacked everything, friend and foe alike, their brains trapped between chemical compulsion and genetic instinct. The result was chaos. Kalen fought his way to the whelping den, Sierra at his side. They arrived to find Mira standing in front of the pup pile, her small arms spread wide, facing down 3 confused, spray-addled adult Vulcars. The girl was singing the lullaby. Her voice was thin and trembling, but the melody held. The wild Vulcars hesitated, whimpered, staggered. Then Sierra was there, putting her massive body between Mira and the threat, her roar a command that cut through the chemical fog. The wild ones dropped to their bellies, submitting to the alpha female who had never forgotten what pack meant. Kalen grabbed Mira, pulled her back. "You were supposed to be in the shelter." "They were scared," Mira said, tears cutting tracks through the dust on her face. "I couldn't leave them." Draven's voice crackled over the compound speakers. "You see, with enough spray, even a child can control them. This is only the beginning, Sorensen. You wanted them to be partners. The galaxy wants weapons. And I will give them weapons." A new ship descended. This one massive, bristling with capture rigs. It was meant to harvest every Vulcar in the compound. Kalen looked at Sierra. At the blood matting her fur. At the fire in her eyes. "We're not prey," he said. And Sierra howled. A call that was taken up by every Vulcar in the valley, bonded and wild alike, until the very air vibrated with a single unified voice. The pack was gathering. The ship descended, its capture rigs deploying like the legs of a mechanical spider. Mercenary Threx rappelled down on cables, their aerosol dispensers hissing clouds of synthetic peptide. The wild Vulcars in Draven's force convulsed, caught between chemical command and the rising tide of Sierra's alpha call. Some collapsed. Some turned on their handlers. The battle dissolved into a roiling, chaotic melee. Kalen ran toward the command center, Sierra loping at his side, the old female and the male guarding his flanks. Mira had been passed to a medic, still humming the lullaby under her breath as she was carried to the bunker. Every human in the compound who had bonded with a Vulcar felt it, a pressure behind the sternum, a pull toward the center of the storm. The pack was calling them home. Vexa intercepted Kalen at the blast door. Her chromatophores blazed with urgent crimson. Draven has a kill switch. A sub-frequency in the synthetic peptide that can induce cardiac arrest in any Vulcar exposed above a threshold dose. He's broadcasting it from his command shuttle. Can we jam it? The frequency is embedded in the chemical itself. You can't jam a molecule. She grabbed his arm. But your bond, your natural bond, produces a counteragent. The original peptide. If you can get close enough, if you can trigger a full pack resonance across every bonded pair simultaneously, it might neutralize the synthetic before their hearts stop. How close? You'd have to be on his shuttle. Kalen looked up. The shuttle hovered 200 meters above the compound, its capture rigs already snatching up disoriented Vulcars. Draven's face was visible on its external display, broadcasting his triumph to the council delegates huddled in the bunker. "Get everyone bonded to broadcast the hum," Kalen said. "Every human, every Vulcar. I'll get on that shuttle." Sierra whined, a sound of pure, desperate refusal. She would not let him go alone. Kalen pressed his forehead to hers, and in that contact, something passed between them that needed no words, no chemicals, no explanation. A decision. A promise. Together, then. The old female crouched. Kalen and Sierra climbed onto her back, and the male and juvenile formed a spearhead. They launched upward, not toward the shuttle's landing ramp, but toward the maintenance gantry of the damaged outer wall. From there, a running leap onto a mercenary drop pod. Then a second leap, and Sierra's claws caught the shuttle's open cargo bay door. Kalen rolled off the old females back into the bay. Sierra landed beside him with a screech of claws on metal. The cargo hold was filled with caged Vulcars, wild ones, foaming and thrashing as the synthetic peptide ravaged their systems. Draven's voice echoed from the internal speakers. "You're persistent, Sorensen. I'll give you that. But you're also predictable. I knew you'd come for them." Armed Threx emerged from the shadows, their sprayers trained on Sierra. Kalen didn't hesitate. He began to hum. Not the lullaby this time. Something older. Something that had lived in the throats of his ancestors long before Homo sapiens had a name. A hunting song. A pack call that resonated not through air, but through the deeper, stranger channels that the bond had opened. Sierra's roar joined him. Then the old female's howl, still outside the ship. Then the male and the juvenile. And from below, a rising tide of human voices and Vulcar cries that built into a harmonic wave. In the bunker, Vex's instruments went wild. Every bonded pair in the compound, 43 humans, 61 Vulcars, began broadcasting the original peptide signature, carried on a frequency that was not sound, not light, but something the universe had forgotten how to measure. The synthetic peptide in Draven's dispensers destabilized. The wild Vulcars in the cargo bay stopped thrashing. Their eyes cleared. The aerosol clouds became inert mist. Draven's voice lost its smugness. "What are you doing? What is this?" Kalen walked through the cargo bay, Sierra at his side, the cages opening as the newly lucid wild Vulcars used their strength to bend the bars. The Threx mercenaries backed away, their weapons suddenly useless. "You wanted a weapon," Kalen said. "You got a pack. And a pack protects its own." He reached the cockpit door. Sierra tore it off its hinges with one swipe of her claws. Inside, Draven fumbled with a sidearm, his scales a sickly, terrified yellow. Kalen didn't attack. He simply stood there, one hand on Sierra's shoulder, and looked at the Threx with something that was almost pity. "The spray was a copy," Kalen said. "A dead thing. The bond is alive. It can't be stolen, synthesized, or controlled. You spent all this effort trying to weaponize love, and you never once understood what it actually is." Draven fired. The plasma bolt streaked toward Kalen's chest. Sierra moved. Not to intercept the bolt, she moved into its path. The impact threw her across the cockpit. The scent of burned fur and scorched flesh filled the air. Kalen's world collapsed into a single, agonized scream of her name. He caught her as she fell. The wound was catastrophic, a cauterized crater in her side, smoke still rising from the edges. Her amber eyes found his, and a low, broken whimper escaped her throat. Outside, the harmonic wave faltered. The bonded pairs below felt the blow as if it had struck their own hearts. The hum stuttered. The wild Vulcars in the cargo bay grew restless again. Draven laughed, high and hysterical. "Your bond dies with her. Everything you built dies with her." Kalen gathered Sierra's head into his lap. He could feel her heartbeat stuttering against his palms. The hum that rose from him was barely a whisper, broken by grief. But it was the lullaby. The first song. The one his grandmother had taught him. The one he had sung to a mountain lion when he was 14 years old and waiting to die. He sang it now. Not to calm her. To thank her. To tell her, in the only language that mattered, that she was Pack, and always would be. The old female landed in the cockpit doorway. The male followed, the juvenile, then the wild ones from the cargo bay, crowding the passage, drawn by the sound. One by one, they lifted their heads and added their voices. Not howls. A vibration, deep and resonant, that harmonized with Kalen's broken song. The harmonic wave rebuilt itself. Not from the bunker below, from within the shuttle. From a dozen Vulcars who had never been bonded, never been sprayed, never known anything but fear and solitude. And now they chose. Not compelled. Not commanded. They chose to join the song. Sierra's heartbeat did not stop. It steadied. The wound did not close, but the bleeding slowed. Her amber eyes focused on Kalen's face with a clarity that defied biology. Vex's voice came through the comms, awed and hushed. The resonance, the combined peptide output, is regenerating cellular tissue. It's not magic. It's a feedback loop. The more they bond, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets, the more they bond. They've created a living immune system. Sierra's chest rose. Fell. rose again, stronger. She licked Kalen's hand, and the rough tongue was the most beautiful thing he had ever felt. Draven stared, his weapon dangling, his face a mask of incomprehension. Kalen looked up at him, eyes wet but hard. "You're under arrest. For attempted murder. For trafficking in sentient beings. For crimes against the pack." The Threx mercenaries didn't intervene. They had felt the song. And even a Threx, it turned out, could recognize pack when it found one. The shuttle landed. Medics swarmed aboard. Sierra was carried out on a stretcher, Kalen walking beside her, refusing to let go of her paw. The council delegates emerged from the bunker, and the head counselor took one look at the scene. The humans and Vulkars mingled, the wild ones sitting calmly beside their former captors, a 6-year-old girl feeding ration bars to a juvenile, and made a decision that would reshape galactic law. "The Vulkar-human bond," he announced, "is hereby recognized as a protected sapient right. Any attempt to replicate, synthesize, or weaponize it without mutual consent is hereby declared a crime against civilization." 1 year later, Instructor Vexa stood before a new class at the Galactic Combined Forces Academy. The lecture hall was the same. The hologram podium was the same. But the first slide she displayed was not an anatomical chart of predator dentition. It was a photograph, Kalen seated in a sunlit field, surrounded by 4 generations of Vulkars. Sierra lay beside him, her head on his knee. Mira, now 7, was sprawled across Sierra's flank, fast asleep. "Class 5 predators," Vexa began, her chromatophores a warm, satisfied gold, "are the universe's ultimate hunters. Their aggression cannot be trained out. Their loyalty cannot be earned. Any attempt at domestication ends in failure. This is, or was, considered biological law." She paused, let the silence stretch. Then her mouth quirked into the first genuine smile any of her students had ever seen. "Unless," she said, "you are human. But even more importantly, unless you are willing to be pack." The image of Kalen and Sierra stayed on the screen for the rest of the lecture. And every cadet in that hall, from the proudest Brachus to the most skeptical Threx, looked at it and understood that they were witnessing not the end of a lesson, but the beginning of a different way of being in the universe. Far away on Cygni 9, Kalen felt a nudge against his hand. He looked down at Sierra, who rumbled contentedly. The sun was warm. The pups were playing. And somewhere overhead, in the vast and often cold dark between stars, a song was still resonating, carried on frequencies that no instrument could measure, linking pack to pack across the gulf of space. The universe, it turned out, was full of forgotten songs. Humanity had just remembered how to sing them. He sang it now. Not to calm her. To thank her. To tell her, in the only language that mattered, that she was pack, and always would be. The old female landed in the cockpit doorway. The male followed, the juvenile, then the wild ones from the cargo bay, crowding the passage, drawn by the sound. One by one, they lifted their heads and added their voices. Not howls. A vibration, deep and resonant, that harmonized with Kalen's broken song. The harmonic wave rebuilt itself. Not from the bunker below, from within the shuttle. From a dozen Vulkars who had never been bonded, never been sprayed, never known anything but fear and solitude. And now they chose. Not compelled. Not commanded. They chose to join the song. Sierra's heartbeat did not stop. It steadied. The wound did not close, but the bleeding slowed. Her amber eyes focused on Kalen's face with a clarity that defied biology. Vexa's voice came through the comms, awed and hushed. The resonance, the combined peptide output, is regenerating cellular tissue. It's not magic. It's a feedback loop. The more they bond, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets, the more they bond. They've created a living immune system. Sierra's chest rose. Fell. Rose again, stronger. She licked Kalen's hand, and the rough tongue was the most beautiful thing he had ever felt. Draven stared, his weapon dangling, his face a mask of incomprehension. Kalen looked up at him, eyes wet but hard. "You're under arrest. For attempted murder. For trafficking in sentient beings. For crimes against the pack." The Threx mercenaries didn't intervene. They had felt the song. And even a Threx, it turned out, could recognize pack when it found one. The shuttle landed. Medics swarmed aboard. Sierra was carried out on a stretcher, Kalen walking beside her, refusing to let go of her paw. The council delegates emerged from the bunker, and the head counselor took one look at the scene. The humans and Vulkars mingled, the wild ones sitting calmly beside their former captors, a 6-year-old girl feeding ration bars to a juvenile, and made a decision that would reshape galactic law. The Vulkar-human bond, he announced, is hereby recognized as a protected sapient right. Any attempt to replicate, synthesize, or weaponize it without mutual consent is hereby declared a crime against civilization. 1 year later, Instructor Vexa stood before a new class at the Galactic Combined Forces Academy. The lecture hall was the same. The hologram podium was the same. But the first slide she displayed was not an anatomical chart of predator dentition. It was a photograph, Kalen seated in a sunlit field, surrounded by 4 generations of Vulkars. Sierra lay beside him, her head on his knee. Mira, now 7, was sprawled across Sierra's flank, fast asleep. Class 5 predators, Vexa began, her chromatophores a warm, satisfied gold, are the universe's ultimate hunters. Their aggression cannot be trained out. Their loyalty cannot be earned. Any attempt at domestication ends in failure. This is, or was, considered biological law. She paused, let the silence stretch. Then her mouth quirked into the first genuine smile any of her students had ever seen. Unless, she said, you are human. But even more importantly, unless you are willing to be Pack. The image of Kalen and Sierra stayed on the screen for the rest of the lecture. And every cadet in that hall, from the proudest Brachus to the most skeptical Threx, looked at it and understood that they were witnessing not the end of a lesson, but the beginning of a different way of being in the universe. Far away on Cygni 9, Kalen felt a nudge against his hand. He looked down at Sierra, who rumbled contentedly. The sun was warm. The pups were playing. And somewhere overhead, in the vast and often cold dark between stars, a song was still resonating, carried on frequencies that no instrument could measure, linking pack to pack across the gulf of space. The universe, it turned out, was full of forgotten songs. Humanity had just remembered how to sing them. The Academy never forgot the day the human walked into the enclosure. Cadets who witnessed it became instructors themselves, passing the story to new generations. The frosted observation glass where Vexa once stood was replaced with a plaque. It read, "Here, we learned that fear is not the opposite of trust. Fear is what trust defeats." Kalen Sorensen never sought fame. He stayed on Cygni 9, training new handlers, raising pups, and singing lullabies to creatures the galaxy had once called untamable. The program expanded. Other humans came, not soldiers, not scientists, just people willing to sit in the dirt and hum until a predator decided they were worth believing in. Sierra lived 11 more years. She died peacefully, surrounded by her pack, with Kalen's hand on her brow and Myra's head on her flank. Her last act was to lick the scar on his chest, the old one from the mountain lion, as if to say, "You were never alone." Not even then. They buried her beneath the oldest tree on Cygni 9. The pups howled. The humans sang. And somewhere in the deep dark between stars, the song continued. Mira became the youngest handler in program history at 16. Her bonded partner was one of Sierra's grandpups, a fierce female she named Echo. Together, they led the first joint human-Vulkar disaster response team, saving thousands from a collapsing colony on the rim. Draven was imprisoned for life. His synthetic peptide formula was destroyed, and the research behind it buried under layers of legal so dense that no one ever found it again. The Threx mercenaries who survived testified against him. They spoke of the song, how it had made them feel something they had no word for. Not fear. Something else. Something they had forgotten they could feel. Vexa published her findings in the Galactic Journal of Xenobiology. The paper was titled, "The Bond, How a Predator Species Remembered How to Be Pack." It became the most cited work in the field for a decade. At the end of her career, she returned to Cygni 9 to teach at the program's new academy. Her chromatophores, once so quick to betray irritation, now glowed a steady, peaceful gold. The Galactic Council revised its classification system. Class 5 predators were reclassified as bond-capable species. The legal framework for recognizing interspecies emotional bonds became a model for diplomacy across the galaxy. Species that had never spoken to each other began to talk. Not because they were forced to, but because they had seen what trust could build. Kalen lived to be old. His hair went gray. His joints ached. But he still walked the training yards every morning, still hummed the lullaby under his breath, still placed his palm on the brow of every new Volker pup and whispered, "You're not a weapon. You never were." On his last day, the entire compound gathered around him. Mira was there, and Echo and Vexa, and 100 handlers and 100 Volkers, generations of them, stretching back to the 4 who had followed him out of the research wing on that blood-soaked night. He looked at them, and he smiled. "Sing with me," he said. They sang. The old song. The hunting song. The lullaby. The pack call. All of it, woven together into something that had no name, only a feeling that spread from throat to throat, from heart to heart, until the very air shimmered with it. Kalen closed his eyes. His hand rested on the fur of a young Volker pup, one of Sierra's great-great-grandchildren. His breath slowed. The song carried him. He died with a smile on his face and a pack around him. The song did not stop. It never stopped. Today, the training yard on Cygni 9 is full of children, human children and Volker pups, tumbling together in the sun. Their laughter echoes off the old stone walls. Sometimes, a new cadet asks why the program exists. Why humans, of all species, were the ones to teach the galaxy about trust. The answer is always the same. Because they remembered. Because when everyone else saw a monster, they saw something worth singing to. Because they were not afraid to be pack. The universe is vast and cold and full of things that should not make sense. But once in a great while, a human sits down in the dirt, hums a lullaby, and changes everything. Not by force. Not by fear. By remembering a song that was never forgotten. Just waiting to be sung. The pups are playing. The children are laughing. And somewhere, in the warm wind that blows across the valley, a voice still hums, low, rhythmic, eternal. "You're not alone. You never were. Sing with me." The pack answers. The pack always answers.